Counties to construct buildings and wastewater treatment facilities using the design-build contracting method. In short, design-build allows counties to hire a single contractor to both design and build a project rather than having different contractors for both phases. Theoretically, combining the two phases provides the opportunity for savings, both time and expenses for these projects. And certainly in my mind, design-build is just another alternative tool in the toolbox for counties to use. If a project does not lend itself to design-build, then the county can use a more traditional contracting method. The legislature should leave the choice to the counties. The committee has received the required report on county design-build projects from the legislative analysts, and this morning we will hear a 15-minute summary of that report. After that, we have designated 1 hour to discuss the topic. We have assembled three panels of witnesses. Each panel shall have no more than 20 minutes, and so I say to you in the panel, you're welcome as an individual to take the entire 20 minutes. But at any rate, the panel will have no more than 20 minutes, so you want to divide it up and decide how you're going to use it. And then at the end, we will leave time for public comment, and you will find at the sergeant's desk there's a sign-in sheet if you wish to talk about design-build. And this morning, before we start with Mark Whitaker, who's with the Legislative Analyst's Office, I'm going to ask Ms. Keogh if she would like to say a few words.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Keogh. Mr. Whitaker, welcome this morning to you, and so you may begin, sir.
Thank you. Mark Whitaker, Legislative Analyst's Office. I've been asked today to provide a brief background on design-build and also comment specifically on the reports our office received from counties on their use of design-build. As Senator Cox has already mentioned, design-build is kind of an alternative to what statute has traditionally authorized, which is design-bid-build for awarding public works contracts. Design-bid-build traditionally splits construction into two phases. You have a design phase and a construction phase, where the construction phase, which usually accounts for the most of the cost of the project, is bid out to the lowest responsible bidder. However, in recent years, the legislature has authorized a number of state agencies and local governments to utilize an alternative design-bid-build, design-build. The statute we're discussing today authorized all counties to use design-build through January 1st, 2011. And as part of that, they were required to submit reports by December 1st of last year to our office describing projects that they had undertaken using design-build to allow this committee and the legislature a year to evaluate how well design-build had performed at the county level. In the legislation, there were some restrictions on the county's use of design-build. It was only available for projects that with an estimated cost of greater than $2.5 million, and it was limited to buildings and wastewater treatment facilities. Just a little background on design-build. It essentially, unlike design-bid-build, it awards a contract for both design and construction to a single entity. The owner, in this case the county, describes the specifics that they want in the project, and then bid it out to a team, a firm, to do both the design and the construction. The Public Contract Code outlines a four-step process that counties have to follow in awarding the design-build contract. The contract, rather than being awarded just to the lowest bidder, can be awarded on a number of objective and subjective criteria, with a minimum of 10% of the weight must be given to price, technical design, life cycle costs, skilled labor force availability, and safety record. And then the counties have the discretion on the remaining 50%, how they want to weigh what criteria they want to use in selecting the contract. So as I said, the counties were required to submit reports on the projects that they use design-build on. I believe you have a copy of that report, and I'll just give a brief overview of our findings. I think it's safe to say that there were no shocking findings or recommendations for major overhaul of the legislation in our report. And, namely that was because the county's reports were fairly positive as far as the design build method is concerned. But another reason is that there's just some general limitations of the reporting requirement. For example, we had a very limited sample size. Only 5 counties submitted projects that had been completed by the deadline. And an additional 4 counties reported another 10 projects that they were currently working on. However, as those weren't completed, we were really only looking at a sample size of 5 projects. The other limitation of the reporting requirement is we felt that one of the goals here was to compare design build to design bid build, the traditional delivery method, and that was very difficult to do since these projects were basically designed and put forth as design build projects, and it was very difficult to discern whether any cost savings or schedule savings were the result of design build or other factors that might have contributed to those things. But in general, we did have a few findings that I'd like to report. Probably the most notable is the large variety of projects that counties chose to undertake with design build. There were projects ranging from close to the minimum amount allowed in cost up to hundreds of millions of dollars. There were very simple small projects to very large complex projects, the most notable probably being the new terminal at the Sacramento airport, which goes against kind of conventional wisdom. In past reports we've noted that most entities report that design build is best suited for very simple straightforward projects, and we found in this instance that some counties were pursuing very complex projects that had high security needs, such as adult and juvenile corrections facilities. So I think there is a change there where some counties have felt more comfortable moving forward with complex projects, and perhaps as design bid evolves, they feel more comfortable in providing more details in the request for proposal and putting forward more complex and costly projects. Some of the completed projects were ahead of schedule, a few were behind schedule, some were below budget, some were a little above their budget, but in general they were close to their costs and close to their schedules. But as I said earlier, it's difficult to determine how much of this was as a result of design build versus design bid build or just other factors. The legislation allows counties to, in awarding the contract, to either award the contract to the lowest bidder or to use a best value method that takes into account both subjective and objective criteria. All the counties that sent in reports chose to use the best value method rather than to the lowest bidder. Most of the counties used the 10% criteria that I described earlier, where in evaluating the bids, they weighted those 5 criteria at 10%. With the exception of price, on some projects, the counties weighed price at greater than 10%, up to 20 or 25%. And then lastly, some of the recommendations that counties provided. A few counties mentioned lowering the costs. The minimum cost right now, as I said, is at $2.5 million. They recommended decreasing it whether to 1.5 or 1 million, so they had more flexibility to use design build on additional projects. And they also, 1 or 2 counties mentioned the idea of limiting the restrictions on the type of project. As I've already said, it's limited to buildings and wastewater treatment facilities, and a few counties mentioned they would like to use it on additional types of projects. So from the county's reports and our office's previous looks at design build, our report offered a few observations and recommendations on this legislation. We first reported that perhaps the reporting requirement should no longer be necessary. For the reasons I've already said, we're not sure how useful or meaningful additional reports would be based on the limitations of the sample size and being able to compare projects based on the information that is provided in the report. So either removing the reporting requirement or modifying it in some way might be useful. We also recommended, as we have previously, that the state may be interested in having one uniform design-build statute. Right now in code, there's design-build statute for counties, there's design-build statute for cities, a pilot project for transportation projects, and each code is slightly different. And just to have a uniform single code so that every contractor, whether they're bidding it for a county or city project or for one of the designated special districts or for university projects or whatever, knows exactly what code to look at, and there's a standard procedure for design build to follow. We also recommended eliminating the limit on project cost of $2.5 million. We don't see a policy reason for limiting design build to only projects greater than $2.5 million. And then lastly, our other recommendation was to kind of ensure the integrity of the public bidding process, perhaps requiring a greater emphasis on cost in awarding the design build contract. There currently, statute says cost only has to be 10% of the weighted criteria, and this is quite a departure from design bid build, where price is essentially 100% of the criteria. So in our report, we recommend at least maybe raising it to 20%, as some counties already did voluntarily. We also recommend emphasizing an alternative method of a two-envelope system, where cost would even be a greater factor in awarding the project. But I think regardless of the method that's chosen, we think that 10% is probably too small of a weight for price in awarding the contract. So I'll conclude my remarks there, and I'm available to answer questions if there are.
Ms. Carroll, let's see if there are any questions. Any questions, Ms. Wiggins, Ms. Keough?
Thank you, Senator Cox. I do have a couple questions. Just a little more detail. Thank you for your presentation. On the in your report, you call out the competition is based upon either best value criteria or the lowest responsible bid, and I guess most counties chose the best value criteria. Is that it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you explain in a little more detail what the difference is? And then is this part of the two-envelope process as well? Okay, so just,
certainly.
And I like your recommendation on cost having a greater value. So if you could just amplify your remarks in that area, I appreciate it.
I'll start by describing the best value bid process. Essentially, what will happen is the counties will pre-qualify any number of design-build firms that want to bid on the project, where they have to meet certain criteria, whether it's their safety record, their experience, their bonding capacity, and things like that. And then of those pre-qualified firms, they're allowed to bid on the contract. And the counties, and under the best value method, will evaluate those bids usually based on a point system. So let's say there's 100 points. Well, under the current statute, 10 of those points will be awarded to price, 10 will be awarded to safety, and so on. So, the team that submits the bid with the lowest price will get 10 points, which will add to their cumulative score. The team with the best safety record will get 10 points, and then statute requires that at least 50 of those points go to prescribed criteria. The other 50 points, counties can select what they want to use those points for. So maybe it's 30 points for the design and 20 points for the bidder's experience, and they'll evaluate the bid and award points on that. And then essentially the contract goes to the team with the most points.
So that's the best value criteria.
That's the best value criteria.
Or they could just go to the lowest bidder.
Or just go to lowest bidder.
Okay. So
from the pre-qualified firms, as I understand it.
Okay. And then the two-envelope?
The two-envelope
process?
system would essentially be the bidders submit an envelope that contains their price.
They're in the best value criteria thing now, or or either way?
It's kind of a mix. Essentially, they're going to submit an envelope that has their proposal with all their specifications, their experience, all the a minimum benchmark of what they want those proposals to look like. So if perhaps 2 or 3 firms will submit criteria that meet the county's minimum specifications, and then there'll be a separate envelope that contains the bidder's price. And so if 3 firms met the minimum criteria, they'll open the separate envelopes that contain the price and award the contract to whichever of those 3 firms offered to meet the minimum criteria for the lowest cost.
So first they meet the project description.
First they meet the project description, and then
the county would have to choose the lowest bid.
Lowest bidder, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Wiggins, do you have any questions at this point?
No.
Okay. All right. Ms. Whitaker, anything else you'd like to wind up with?
I think that concludes it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation this morning. The next panel that we have is the government relations reactions and county government's reactions and advice. And we have the county architect from the county of Solano. We have the airport director from the county of Sacramento, as well as the assistant general service director from the county of San Diego. And it appears we have 4 gentlemen at the panel, so the last person to arrive can introduce themselves after we've finished with the first 3. So we'll begin with the county architect from the county of Solano, sir. Remember now you have 20 minutes, and you're welcome to take the entire 20. Probably would not be in your best interest as far as your colleagues are concerned, but...
And I won't take the entire 20 minutes.
What's that?
The entire panel.
The entire panel has 20 minutes, and it is a situation that one person could take the entire 20 minutes. It probably wouldn't be very popular with your panel, but you may begin, sir. Begin with your name.
Good morning, Chairman Cox and members of the Local Government Committee. My name is Canon Artici. I'm the Solano County Architect, and I'm also the immediate past president of the California Counties Architects and Engineers Association, which is an educational organization dedicated to improving capital project delivery in California counties. I've been a licensed architect for about 25 years, working, half that time in the private sector and half the time in the public sector. Solano County is one of the 8 original counties authorized to use this alternative delivery method, commonly known as design build, when it was initially enacted in California in 1995. Throughout the years, we've delivered a mix of projects of varying size and complexity, and all of them have been successful using the design build delivery method that we've elected to apply that delivery method to those projects. These include everything from routine tenant improvements to a 3-block development with a 300,000 gross square foot office building, an adjacent 5-level parking structure with over 1,000 stalls, and a separate freestanding probation services building, 2 stories, 43,000 square feet. On December 8th of 2009, the Solano County Board of Supervisors unanimously voted to support renewal of this legislation under consideration today as part of Solano County's 2010 state legislative platform. The recommendations included in the LAO's report, which you've just heard summarized. In general, Solano County supports the LAO's recommendations, but we would also ask that you consider that the renewed legislation not preclude the county's ability to set a stipulated sum or fixed cost for the work and award based on best value. This is the methodology that was pioneered by the state on the East End project and has served as a model for counties statewide. We've used the best value method to define enhancements that improve operational quality, schedule, sustainability, and community benefits, and that's worked well. One of the intangibles here that this methodology affords is things that we would never see come forward in the design bid build approach. For instance, we had a design build enhancement that, without increasing the project costs, that involved a cooperative educational ground floor program in which the project was utilized to expose interested students from a local high school to architectural and construction related career paths. So this legislation helps to build the local community as well as build a project. To specifically address some of the issues under consideration at today's hearing, we'd offer the following. As far as timing, the county's preference would be to make the current law permanent. The The project limits, we're in agreement of any project of any size should be eligible for the use of the design-build project delivery. We would prefer that the limits, any project type, I think we've demonstrated, could also be, could benefit from this project delivery method. As far as contract procedures, we're in favor of uniform legislation in general, so that the marketplace understands the approach to design build, whether they're a county or working with county, city, special district, or redevelopment agency. The tool envelope system could be added, but again, we would request that there be flexibility for the counties to utilize this method on a per project basis. As far as qualifications, we're fine, I think, with making requests or inquiries of violations of the False Claims Act and the California False Claims Act, but we think that should be bracketed by a time period, perhaps, in which those offenses have occurred. In short, I would echo Senator Cox's opening comments that this is another tool in the toolbox for counties to use, and we would highly encourage the renewal of this legislation on that basis.
Thank you. Any questions of the gentleman from Solano County? Mr. Acree.
Chairman Cox, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Hardy Acree, and in my day job, I am Director of Airports for the Sacramento County Airport System. I'm also the 2010 Chairman of Airports Council International North America, a professional trade organization that represents airports throughout the United States and Canada. First, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear before you today and speak to the benefits that have accrued to Sacramento County by having design build, as you said, Senator Cox, as a tool in our toolbox while designing and constructing the largest capital improvement project in Sacramento County's history, known locally as the Big Bill. While our design project remains a work in progress, our experience to date has been a very positive one. And here are just a few fast facts to help set the table to give you a feel and appreciation for what the size and the scope of this project entails. We have 670,000 square feet of landside terminal and airside concourse under construction. We have 19 aircraft contact gates, including a new international arrivals facility and federal inspection station with 400 passengers per hour processing capability. It includes a dual-track automated people mover shuttle system connecting the landside terminal with the airside concourse. It will have a two-level roadway system with curbsides. It is in total $1.1 billion, of which $770 million is hard construction cost and systems cost. And it's important to note that our peak construction is coming up this summer, and at peak we'll have just around 1,200 high-quality construction jobs involved on this project. It is scheduled to open in fourth quarter 2011. And while every project is different, most have many similarities. Every project also has elements that lend themselves to being best performed using one delivery method or another. Even the traditional design bid build has applications and is at times the preferred approach to an alternative delivery method such as design build or construction manager at risk. It is important to note that if the county had used the traditional design bid build, we would have added 18 months to the program and estimate that the project costs could have added an additional $200,000 to $300,000 per day for a potential increase to our project of $100 to $150 million. This is over and above the $1.1 billion we currently have. I cannot overstate the importance of having design build available to Sacramento County. We deeply regret also not having CMR, Construction Manager at Risk, in our toolbox. It is hard to comprehend how this project would have come together were it not for the design build methodology. There's no doubt in my mind, were it not for the benefits of design build to realize a savings of time, and time is money, the cost and construction time frame associated with this project would have made it prohibitive. We strongly encourage you to not only renew this enabling legislation, as my colleague, we also ask that you eliminate the sunset provision altogether and make design build permanent. Lastly, failing to extend design build will put Sacramento International at a competitive disadvantage because our competitors are not so encumbered. The cost of developing infrastructure without design build will be higher, and that additional cost will be passed along to our customers, the airlines and the traveling public. Ours is but a small piece in the grand scheme of things, especially if you consider the statewide impact on construction jobs if design build is not available. This will significantly increase the cost of infrastructure development in California, thereby making it less competitive with other states. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of alternative delivery methods, including design build.
Any questions of Mr. Acree? All right. Who would be the third speaker then?
Hi, my name is Masood Iftikhari. I'm a Deputy Director with County of Los Angeles Department of Public Works. The county has a very active capital projects program, and we've implemented a major shift in our program to utilizing the authority granted in Section 2133 of the Public Contract Code. In January of 2006, this section became effective for us. We decided purposefully not to implement or to utilize this tool right away, and instead go through a training program to ensure our staff and ourselves really understand how this tool can be utilized best. And in that effort, it took us about 1.5 years of going through various training programs to better understand this tool. Since then, we've shifted our program to utilize the design-build tool. Of the 16 projects presented in the LAO's report, 6 of them were County of Los Angeles projects, which are not complete. They are in the process. And even though we've reported 6 projects, we actually currently have 13 projects in various phases of implementation, totaling a value of more than $700 million. Among these is the renovation of Martin Luther King Jr. Medical Center. In addition to these projects, we are in a process of master planning projects to take to our board, which will value around $3 billion. We have put our schedules and implementation process through the design-build program. We support the recommendations that are in the LAO's report and encourage the legislature to continue its support of design-build method of contracting. In addition to our general support of the recommendations, such as eliminating the sunset clause, we also offer the following recommendation. We are recommending eliminating any limitations on the size of any project that can use design-build. We feel the project merits can be a very good indicator as to whether design-build could be used for that project or not. We are also recommending elimination of restrictions on the types of projects that can use design-build. Again, the merits of the project can easily tell us whether we should use design-build or not. We really appreciate the fact that we do have this additional tool in the toolbox. There are a number of projects that we have that we are using design-bid-build methodology on. We have not abandoned that. We feel there is a lot of good places for its use, but at the same time, design-build is an excellent tool and we appreciate its use. In addition, we're recommending eliminating the mandate that the following criteria be evaluated as part of the best value selection process. These 2 criteria that we would like you to consider eliminating is the life cycle cost analysis as well as the safety record requirements. We feel both of these requirements, while they are very, very valid, they can be taken care of in other ways, especially if the design build is going to be implemented very early in the stage of the project. A life cycle cost analysis may not be as accurate of a tool early on. It is a good tool as the project develops. But early on, requiring that really is merely a paper exercise. The safety record, of course, the contractor's safety record dictates its insurance requirements and whatnot. So as such, it's already taken care of. Lastly, we would recommend eliminating the requirement of the local agencies enforcing a labor compliance program on behalf of the Department of Industrial Relations as a condition of use of design build. Many local agencies have or are in the process of successfully implementing design build projects. Based on these collective experiences, the project delivery, design build delivery method has shown great usefulness for public projects and has been widely embraced by the design and construction communities. The changes recommended above would allow local agencies greater discretion and flexibility in how they implement design-build projects to meet the needs of their local communities while maintaining the legislature's general control of contracting statewide. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of Ms. Keough? And now the gentleman from San Diego. Raining in San Diego today, sir?
It certainly is raining in San Diego.
Just checking. I wanted to know how it was in Paradise, that's all.
That's right. America's finest city. My name is Lou Cavanero. I'm the Assistant Director for General Services for the county. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of California, and I've been working on design build from a personal professional for the last 15 years or so. Use of design build in San Diego County, we have two projects that are underway. We've broken ground on both of them, having gone through the selection process and design process, and are very encouraging as we go through construction. We foresee the use of it in further projects in our capital program that we've already identified, and so we would concur with the colleagues here about making it permanent legislation. My panel members here have talked about the benefits of large projects, so I'd like to turn, which I concur with, I'd like to turn to the use of design build on smaller projects and the elimination of the $2.5 million threshold. We've looked at our out-year programs and have found significant projects to use design build at a lower threshold, ranging almost from, not quite from zero, but very low, on up into the $1 million, $2 million range. We've looked at our benefits of that and see a 10 to 20% cost savings and time savings in staff work, and that coupled with the advantages of design builds that has been discussed here, we think would be a significant benefit to make it, like we've all said, another tool in our tool belt. Design build continues to be one of the tools that would be used. I think the additional benefit is that smaller design firms and smaller construction companies or design build entities that are not familiar with design build or want to engage in that world would have an opportunity to come to the table and learn and work with us in developing expertise in the use of design build. We would encourage the continued use of best value as one of the tools, in addition to the fixed price, low bid, or a two envelope system. Price is very important, especially in these days and times, but there are times when we can gain from the creativity of our design build entities, as well as gaining enhancements into the projects through the use of best value. Thank you for your time.
Any questions of the gentleman from San Diego?
Please, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are the projects that you're using design build on in San Diego?
We have two libraries in the $10 to $15 million range. One is in Fallbrook and one is in Ramona.
And did you use the, which one did you use, the value criteria?
We use best value on both of them.
So they're under construction now?
Yes, we broke ground on both of them. One is, yeah, they're coming out of the ground.
Excellent.
Very
Good.
successfully coming out of the ground.
Not in my district, but I still applaud your efforts. Thank you.
Gentlemen, yes, sir. Mr. Aker, you have one last comment, sir?
Yes, just another perspective on life cycle costs. We would encourage you to keep that as a criteria. When you look at best value, in our particular project, it is not the purchase price of the systems, and we have hundreds of millions of dollars of systems going into this new terminal building. It is the life cycle cost that is very much of a concern to us. So we like being able to rate and select systems based not on the lowest bid, but on the best value, including life cycle cost.
All right, sir. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your testimony this morning. We'll now take the second panel, which is Mr. Bowles, Mr. Close, Ms. Barbara Wagner, and Kevin Dayton, and anyone else who wishes to come. Let me remind you that we do have a 20-minute time limit. So it appears each of you have about 5 minutes, roughly. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Senators, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about the design-build delivery method. My name is Seth Bowles, and I'm Operations Manager for Hensel Phelps Construction Company. I'm also co-chair for the Board of Directors for the Santa Clara chapter of the Association of General Contractors. I've also earned the designation of Design-Build Professional with the Design-Build Institute of America. In my 21 years with Hensel Phelps, I've had the opportunity to work on numerous design-build construction projects in California. Among them have been design-build projects for the state of California, the counties of Alameda and San Joaquin, the San Mateo Community College District, and the cities of both Sacramento and San Jose. The most important common denominator for these projects, for me, is that they've all been considered successful by the owners, by us, and all the stakeholders. I imagine that one of the goals of the state 15 years ago, when they allowed the legislation for design-build, was to experiment with a new delivery method with the hopeful goal of realizing higher success rate in the completion of projects. Design-build is a better delivery method than the design-bid-build, and I believe that the best proof is in the results. For Hensel Phelps, the success of all of the design-build projects that we've been involved with has been undeniable. They've all been completed on time and within budget and without claim. Many have been under budget and under schedule. Specific example that's close to everybody's heart here is the Department of Education, the Block 225 project that was delivered on time, actually 10 months early and within budget. Another recent example is the San Joaquin Administration Building, which we just recently completed, again under budget and under schedule. Another recently completed design-build project was the addition of the hospital at the San Quentin State Prison. These are just a few examples. There's many more, all successful. Specific to the suggested changes in the current legislation, I also would want to highly suggest that the stipulated sum best value process be recognized. This has been the approach, the stipulated sum best value approach, on many of the design-build jobs that we participated in, and certainly have always been very successful. I don't believe that adding more weight to the cost component of the selection is an improvement. In fact, I think that it goes against some of the very basic premises of design-build. So with that, I'd just like to say, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions of the gentleman? Mr. Close.
Thank you. My name is Robert Close, and I'm a registered professional engineer in California and 4 other states, and I'm a vice president with Parsons Brinkerhoff. Parsons Brinckerhoff is an international engineering firm with 14,000 employees worldwide. My company has performed roadway, transit, and building design, build projects all over the world and throughout the United States. And personally, I've worked on 6 design build projects here in California and Nevada. The bottom line is that the design build procurement method is a well-established and important tool for government agencies to get their projects delivered. It is and should be one of the tools available to all public agencies. Using this tool does not automatically make a project successful. Success of any project is dependent upon the abilities and the resources of the people administering and working on that project. As the report points out, this tool has many advantages. With it, a project can generally be delivered much faster, such as a year saved on the State Route 22 project and 18 months saved on the Eastern Toll Road projects, both in Orange County. It can also achieve savings through innovation due to the collaboration between the designer and the contractor, as they are a team and they work together from the beginning of design all the way through project completion. Innovation saved tens of millions of dollars on the Pasadena GO Line project, not counting the millions more saved by the rapid design and construction changes that were made to meet changing field conditions that arose. The combination of innovations and time savings can and do add up to significant dollar savings on most projects. As throughout the United States, there have been many successful design-build projects in California, and any discussions that they are not is a fabrication of misinformation. Some of this is based on political agendas and certainly not the facts. While a design-build project is primarily a private endeavor, the public agency is responsible, and the state and the city and county government employees can and must be involved in these projects throughout. All the necessary public protections are in place for this project delivery method, just as they are for the design, bid, build method. Public agencies moving forward with projects should have control of that project and should have the authority to decide how to deliver that project to the public through every stage of that development. To decide otherwise is disingenuous and insulting to those public officials responsible for delivering those projects. I believe in the American Council of Engineering Companies of California that design-build legal authorization should not only be in place for local governments, but there should be a common authority for all agencies in California and for all types of public works. In that way, we agree with many of the considerations of the LAO report. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. Any questions of the gentleman? I really want to welcome Senator Price. Thank you for being here. All right. I think you're next.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman and Senators. We appreciate the opportunity today to provide our reactions and input to the current legislation allowing the county's use of design-build contracting. My name is Barbara Wagner. I'm a Senior Vice President with Clark Construction. I'm serving here today as a representative of the Western Pacific region of the Design-Build Institute of America. DBIA is a national authority on design-build, and we have been a front-end advisor to the California State Legislature since the year 2000. I currently serve on the Executive Council of the National Board, and I was Regional President, Western Regional President for the last 2 years. Design-build has been used extensively both nationally and in the state of California. Past history has shown that design-build has proven its merits. There are no fatal flaws, and as we discussed, it's been another tool in the toolbox for an owner to use in the state of California. Just what I forgot to mention personally about me, I've been with Clark Construction for 25 years. I've been involved in design-build procurement and construction since the 1980s. I've done national, federal, and state and local contracting and design-build. I understand it was difficult for the LAO report to draw conclusions on the effectiveness of design-build delivery based on the limited reports received from the counties. I've left with you a handout which outlines some basic design-build best practices along with a few research studies completed over the years which basically confirms the faster, better, cheaper claim of design-build. These research studies were based on hundreds of projects and confirms that design-build is on average 33% faster in terms of overall delivery, 12% faster in construction schedule, and 5% cheaper in price without compromising quality. I have also left with you some data on the status of design-build legislation, both here in California and the rest of the country. As you will see in the data, 2009 was our most successful year, with over 100 bills passed nationally granting or expanding design-build legislation. I would like to address your policy choices and outline our recommendations. In terms of timing, we recommend the current law be permanent. In terms of project limits, we recommend that the law be open to all dollar limits without a minimum or a maximum. In addition, we would recommend that design-build not be limited to buildings and related improvements in wastewater treatment facilities, as the current law dictates. Contract procedures, we recommend that in lieu of separate legislation providing authority for different groups in different time spans, we would be in favor of a single statute that applies to all public entities, counties, cities, special districts, and redevelopment agencies. Also in the report, there was a discussion of the two-envelope system that has been discussed a few times today. We would support a two-envelope system as long as the design technical solution was properly weighted. The two-envelope system, as described in the LAO report, does not lend itself to best value procurement. Basically, the process as described is essentially a low-bid procurement and does not allow the owner the flexibility to set the criteria and choose the best technical solution in lieu of low price. The way that design-build works best is that the RFP fully describes what the owner expects, sets the quality standards for achieving that expectation, but stops short of prescribing what the solution would be. In terms of the reporting requirements and qualifications, DBIA does not have an opinion. In closing, we at DBIA support best value contracting versus a competitive bidding process and recommend that the committee considers extending design-build authority to all agencies to use as another tool in the toolbox. We thank you for the opportunity to present to you our thoughts today. We appreciate the effort of Chairman Cox and his committee and the great strides that have been made in enacting good design-build legislation in the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of the lady? Yes, Ms. Q.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. You were, let's go back to the two-envelope thing, my favorite discussion today. I guess I'm getting ready for the Oscars or something.
Getting ready for the what, please?
The Oscars, or the Golden Globe, or whatever, all the award shows, envelopes are. So you're saying it doesn't quite work for you, or can you, even though the way it was explained, you would first do the good bid, and then the second step would be the price, is the way I understand it. How does it not work for you, and then how would we properly emphasize low bid, cost savings for the public in using design build, excuse me.
There are a couple of options, but let me address the two-envelope, and I'm going to talk about the stipulated sum for a minute that Seth had discussed earlier. In terms of the two-envelope system, basically, as an example, let's say you have a project, and the evaluation committee reviews the technical proposal, and they decide that one proposal is technically superior to the other proposals. However, they all meet a minimum requirement in terms of whatever the guideline is in terms of passing that first envelope. So the way that it's being proposed is that as long as you meet a certain requirements in the technical proposal, then it's a pass-fail, and then you open up the second envelope and the low price wins. But it really doesn't allow for
so there might not be the quality assurance in the first step.
Well, you can depend on that, but it may not be the solution that the agency may be looking. There may be some betterments in another proposal that may have scored higher, but still the lower grade proposal may have met the minimum requirements. I should have brought him. I have a great example that I should have brought to pass out. But basically, let's say one proposal gets 85 points on the technical, another one gets 75 points, and another one gets 75 points. 75 points on the technical is your minimum criteria for going to opening the envelope. depending on how that is graded, once you open the envelope, the lowest price may not have been the technically superior, may have been the 75
It could be
point.
technically less superior.
Yeah,
clearly.
exactly.
Okay.
So again, what we would propose again is that you can use a two-envelope system, but it would be under best value criteria, where the first envelope just isn't a pass-fail where it's just the low bid. That is still weighted in the analysis of the price.
Okay. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, the other option is the stipulated sum, which we have all used extensively in the state of California, where an agency has this much money to spend on a project, and they would come and say, we have, $200 million to build whatever. What can you give me for $200 million? And so you would put together all the betterments, and then that would be reviewed in the technical analysis. So we see that with a lot of agencies where they have a certain budget, and they'll use it or lose it, and they want to get what they can for that budget. And that's another way that both Seth with Hensel Phelps and we have seen on quite a few jobs throughout the state.
And one more, sir, if you don't mind. Thank you. You're a national organization, right? You're with
We are.
You're with this one.
I'm with DBIA, but I'm also with the Western Pacific region.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, there's a very interesting map here of states that have design-build legislation and states that have no design-build legislation. And, it's a geographic mix, and it's a, red state, blue state mix, and all that. So why can you shed any light on, is it just that people have not brought up design-build?
This is actually just what's been passed in 2009, is this map. There is another map in here that shows where all the states currently stand in terms of design-build legislation, and that is basically, oops, let me find it here.
Whereabouts is that? Forward?
Yes, pretty much right here. It's forward of that. It's
Okay.
one of the green ones. It's not the one that has to do with transportation, but basically shows you where the states are, except for Rhode Island, which is the only state now left in the country that does not have authorization for public agencies. But what this does show is that we in California have made great strides in terms of legislation, which obviously DBIA has been very happy with. And you can see that we're where we stand with the rest. So.
Okay, and this is up to and including 2009 on this one?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the testimony, even those testimonies I did not hear. Thank you for your efforts. Frequently, there are requirements for small business, disadvantaged, women-owned business, efforts to include them in the contract. Question, have you found with the design-build contracting, it's easier to achieve those efforts? It's more difficult? How do you rate design build in those terms?
Actually, I really don't see a difference. Currently, I mean, when you're looking at the small businesses and you're looking at the veteran-owned business and the disadvantaged and the women-owned businesses, a lot of them have acquired the design-build experience over the years. And so, or we would do a mentor protege or link them up with some other companies that have similar experience so that they can gain that additional experience. But we really haven't had an issue in meeting goals or requirements in terms of small business or DVBE and those types of, so it really hasn't been a...
Is that an experience others have had?
Well, to clarify, if the question is, does design build allow the opportunity for higher percentages to be achieved on a more regular basis?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, then I would say that it definitely does.
Why?
Well, the reason is that, again, at least in the stipulated sum environment, like the challenge of developing a design solution that works for the owner for this amount of money, the same challenge applies to, I want to challenge you to give me the most participation that you can, again, within the dollars that are available. And so we have the flexibility to be more creative and aggressive and to really embrace that more so than in a hard bid process. And a recent example is the design build stipulated sum Fresno VA home. We have a commitment of well over the minimum requirement by the state for DVBE, for SBE, and I think that it's a function of the process.
On the engineering side, for the designers, it's about the same because our process is pretty much the same. We assemble the team and we meet the goals, and it's put together whether we're going strictly just to do the design or be part of the design build team.
Let's see whether or not the answer satisfied Mr.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Dayton, it's your time, sir.
Thank you. Kevin Dayton here with Associated Builders and Contractors, and thank you for the opportunity for us to present our perspective on design build authorization for counties. Like the governor, most legislators, and every panelist here so far, we support the concept of design build, which might be surprising to some of you since we've opposed almost every design build authorization bill that's come up since 2000. We've been opposing those bills to point out 3 provisions in these authorizations that we think are unnecessary and, to put it bluntly, are put in there to give unions and union contractors an advantage in the bidding process. And I'll quickly explain what those 3 are. The first one is a provision that's in the skilled labor section that's been mentioned before. It requires the design build entity to have an agreement with a registered apprenticeship program which has graduated apprentices in each of the following 5 years. Now, the reason why that's a problem for us is because the first non-union apprenticeship program was only approved in 1988. We are continuing the process of getting new programs approved while most union programs have been long established. Mathematically, there are some programs that just can't meet that 5 straight years of graduates. For example, an electrical program, you need 5 years to complete it, and then you need an additional 4 years beyond that to reach the 5-year requirement, making a program have to operate 6 years in order for the design build entity bidding to get the full credit for that. We had a bill introduced and this year that was actually rejected in committee last week, and we've been encouraging a change in this legislation to just require the design build entity to indicate what apprentices they're going to get what program they're going to get the apprentices from. In fact, we point out that putting down something about apprenticeship program as evidence of skilled labor doesn't even make sense because an apprentice by definition isn't fully skilled yet. They're learning their skills. And if you want to look at skilled labor force availability, you could look at the construction unemployment rate. And it's no surprise to us that none of these projects have had problems finding skilled workforce at this time. The second concern we have is the safety record. And the safety record gives an exception to having an injury illness rate and a certain experience modification rate if the bidder is a party to an alternative dispute resolution system as provided for in Section 3201 of the Labor Code. That is an alternative dispute resolution system that is only available to contractors who are in a project labor agreement or a collective bargaining agreement. We don't think that provision, that exception should even be in there. Every contractor should have a good safety record, whether they're in an ADR or not. We don't even have the opportunity to be in the ADR. The third objection we've had is the requirement of the labor compliance program has an exception if the agency requires contractors to sign a project labor agreement. Unfortunately, we had one case at San Joaquin County where at a Board of Supervisors meeting, the staff there actually acknowledged that the reason why they put a project labor agreement on was because that language was in there. Now, that language is soon going to be moot because of the passage of Senate Bill X29 and the changes that are coming to labor compliance. But those are the 3 things that we've been objecting to in these design build things. And we like the legislative analyst's recommendation that the legislature could reduce or eliminate some of these best value criteria, including the skilled labor force availability and the safety records, because that would eliminate 2 of the 3 problems we see in design build. Also, I'd like to comment on our observations and experiences with a specific county design build project at San Joaquin County Administration Building. As I mentioned before, that was covered by a project labor agreement. So our organization was interested in finding out if the union claims about participation of local contractors and labor compliance were actually true or not. So we filed Public Records Act requests to get subcontractor bid lists and certified payroll records. Now, we had a lot of difficulty obtaining these records. County officials repeatedly claimed that the records were in the possession of the design build entity and they couldn't provide them. And I don't think this had anything to do with the design build entity or the county not wanting to provide them or trying to hide them. I think it was just a problem in the process. We received such statements from the county as, since this is private bidding, the contractor is not providing the amounts of the bids to us. He's only giving us the name of the low bidder and who bid it. And also, the county is unable to comply with your request as it seeks a document which is not presently within the county's possession, custody, or control. And the county is unable to comply with your request as it seeks a document which is not presently in the possession of the county. And this should be a concern because when you're using best value, obviously there's a higher degree of subjectivity in who's being chosen in the bidding process. And as a result, there's more opportunity for favoritism, fraud, and corruption in the process. Now, we're not saying at all that there were any problems with this particular job, but the legislature might want to consider how are we going to assure that there is a transparency and accountability to the public on what's going on internally in this process. And the worst thing that would happen in this state regarding design build is if you have an expensive, high-profile design build project and then it's revealed by the media or someone that there's cronyism and corruption in how people were determined. That would give design build a bad name. We think the legislature should continue to monitor and accept these reports from design build entities too.
To wrap up, sir.
Yes. So we would ask that as you consider perhaps making a uniform law for design build that you take these things into account.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of Mr. Dayton? Any questions of the panel?
Just to the last speaker, did you comment on the sunset? Do you want it to be moved
you know what? We don't have an opinion on that. We like the concept of design build. We agree that's a good tool in the toolbox. Our main concern with design build is that the three objections I mentioned to. But as far as the sunset, we're okay with that. Reducing the threshold, we don't have any objections to that either.
Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Price? Mr. Bowles, let me just ask you this question. You said that the more emphasis on price is against the basic principles of design build. So then, if that's the statement that you made, which is that which is recorded here, what are the basic principles of design build in a minute or less?
Yeah. Well, the comment is based on, on my experience of the process. And in less than a minute, one of the components of this process that is experienced often is there's approximately a 2 or 3 month time frame that the proposal goes through once you've shortlisted a firm. And through that, the ownership group gets to know the team. They are able to participate in a dynamic way in the evolution of the design through the design build process. And so when you get to the end of that process and you're now analyzing the product that's been produced by these three firms, the ability for the owner to have a best value criteria that then truly allows them to pick the best team for them with the best design, the best solutions, perhaps the best enhancements. That's what we would like for the ownership group to have the ability to do. And if after that process, this dynamic process, and you feel like you know who the right team is, if the decision is then going to be based on price, to me, that kind of erodes what you're trying to achieve and what you truly have achieved through the process that takes place during the best value selection process.
Ladies, thank you. Thank you for your testimony, gentlemen. Thank you for your testimony. We'll take the next panel, and as you might suspect, we're running right on schedule. And so we have Mr. Curtin, Mr. Diaz, Mr. Pilote, Mr. Toppin, and Mr. Baksamusa. And I hope I'm close. Who will speak first? Will Mr. Curtin speak first?
Well, I'd be happy to, Senator, if that's the way you want to do it.
I'm guided by your judgment, sir.
I'm fine. We don't need to vote. We won't agree.
There are four of you here, so.
Okay, thanks. I'll keep it very brief. We support the LAO report. We like the idea of design build. There's a few other ideas out there floating around. You heard many of them. I'm glad you had the contractors up here. It's very hard to put one process on everybody because you've heard all the differences. I heard one today that I thought was excellent. I forget the actual terminology, but where you say, here's how much money we have, show us what you can do with it. I hadn't thought about that. I kind of like the two-envelope idea myself. But the one thing I want you to do as you go through this process is keep the flexibility as wide as possible. And I just want to use an example. If you're out to buy a car, if you have an absolute amount of money, you know what cars you can buy that are under there. Of course, you can bargain, and you always keep that in mind. But if you see two cars that are similar, and you're restricted to buying the lowest one because they both sort of qualify, whereas the second one might be a little bit more money, but a lot more value, that's the flexibility. And it's a subjective thing, and it is a problem, and the representative from the ABC had a good point. The more subjective you make it, the more difficulties you can run into down the road in terms of graft or corruption or other things. But as long as there's oversight, keep the flexibility. I believe the process is a good one. I can tell you this, the construction industry is in a world of hurt right now. 5 years ago, as of November, so November 2004, there were approximately 875,000 construction workers in California. Last November, there were about 625,000, a drop of 250,000. Well over a 30% loss in employment. So the employment issue is paramount. The other element is you give local government the ability to take the money they have and use it most effectively, get the project started. From my point of view, the quicker at this stage, the better. Not to sacrifice the quality, but to move the ball now when we need the jobs. There are other tools out there that should be discussed, perhaps in other hearings, but this one is extremely important, extremely valuable. The airport representative from San Diego said he cut down 18 months using the design-build process. That 18 months has made a very, very big difference in the employment situation, and it will make a very big difference in the economic value of that airport when it's up and running a year and a half earlier. So we're supportive of all of this. You will hear a little bit about some of the labor standards in there. My theory is if you have a very strong pre-qualification process where safety record is important to qualify, and the other elements that are involved in the pre-qualification, the workforce elements, if you pre-qualify those, then I don't think you need them in the bidding process personally, and I probably am the only labor person who will tell you that. As long as there's a strong pre-qual and you have qualified candidates, let the project stand for itself. Let the value of the project stand for itself. And I'll stop here.
Mr. Curtin, would that also apply to the apprenticeship program?
I believe, again, I'll probably be one of the few you'll hear on this. I believe if there's an apprenticeship program that has been certified by the state, it's appropriate at that point. We can get into all of these restrictions and why they've been done to secure a workforce, but if you're getting your apprentices from a program approved by the state, now I may take some exception to how the state's approving programs. That's a different story. We might want to tighten that up. That's a different story. But if it's approved by the state and you're getting your apprentices from there, I may not like it, but your state qualified, yes, it does include that.
All right. Any questions of Mr. Curtin? And Mr. Diaz, you're next.
Yes. Cesar Diaz. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, we are generally supportive of the design build as an alternative delivery method for construction projects for counties. Combining design and construction work under a single contract expedites construction projects and gets jobs moving faster. Currently, as Mr. Curtin said, we have 30 to 40% unemployment with state building trades members. Our state's infrastructure is in very poor condition, and infrastructure funding itself is also in critical condition. The availability of design-build as an alternative delivery method is needed to make sure that complex, vital projects such as airports and hospitals and transportation are green-lighted to keep the state's economy growing. In the past, our affiliated unions have had reservations about the design-build process, but carefully negotiated language dealing with labor compliance programs, skilled workforce availability, which means quality apprenticeship programs that actually graduate apprentices, and the review of a contractor's safety record contains strong protections that ensure the integrity of the bidding process. This language has been included in both Democratic and Republican legislation over the years and has been long-standing. Such safeguards make sure that highly trained and qualified construction workers are utilized in the building of these multi-million-dollar public works projects. This also protects some of the local hire provisions included in project labor agreements as well. They do not stifle fair competition, but simply and importantly set standards to help level the playing field for employers, both union and non-union, who abide by our state's labor laws. The Sacramento Airport project is a prime example, with union and non-union contractors working on the same project. Because there is a lack of strong minimum standard for pre-qualification of contractors, we believe that lessening the weighting system on the use of quality apprenticeship programs and safety record would negatively impact our construction company partners and our affiliated unions. The labor compliance requirement actually has been dealt with and will no longer be needed because of the creation of the State Public Works Enforcement Fund. We do thank you for this opportunity to express our sentiments.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of the gentleman? All right, who's next then, please?
I'll take this, Mr. Chairman and members. Ted Toppin for the Professional Engineers in California Government. As a constituent, Mr. Cox, let me congratulate you on your chairmanship. So it falls to me to offer sort of a contrary view. PEG has many times testified in opposition to design build because we don't believe it is in the public interest or in the taxpayer's interest. If you were to start from scratch to develop a method for procurement that favored large contractors over taxpayers and public safety, you would develop something that looked an awful lot like this, design build. I give the proponents great credit for having rebranded design build as something new and fancy, but Mr. Detweiler's fine memo to you alludes to something that is true, that throughout design build was the procurement method used throughout the United States in the early 20th century and in the 19th century until reformers got tired of waste and fraud and cronyism and corruption and contracting, and they instituted competitive bidding laws and public oversight and public inspection of public works. So what then does design build do? The first thing it does is eliminate competitive bidding and institute a lump sum bid that is naturally inflated because you don't know what you're going to bid, so you have to build in some risk. And then since you don't know what you're going to build, as you get into the process, you have change orders and you add additional costs. Competitive bidding is universally supported by taxpayers. The independent polls I've seen, 80–90% support competitive bidding. That's where you get a qualified contractor at the best possible price. And that serves taxpayers well. They know it. Competitive bidding at this time is a particularly good deal for taxpayers. Throughout this state, competitively bid construction contracts have come in at 10, 20, 30% below engineers' estimates. That creates additional money for projects and additional money to create jobs. The criteria in best value design build contracts, they are highly subjective. It is very easy to manipulate the criteria to self-select a contractor. And then in the end, after you've done this selection, the final selection is left to a small group of people to pick winners and losers of huge multi-million, sometimes billion-dollar public works contracts. The other thing design build does is universally it allows self-inspection. There's no public inspection on design build jobs. The contractor, the inspector is part of the consortium or the company that wins the design build contract, and they inspect their own work. How do we know that the project is safe? How do you know that it meets design and construction standards? With the design build, you take the contractor's word for it. Now, on some of the question about the extension of the authority, PEG is neutral on the extension of the county's design build authority at this time, provided it includes a sunset and provided it includes some expanded reporting. The LAO's report makes it clear that they can't really tell whether design build was useful or if it delivered projects quicker or at a better price. We would really like to see some sort of independent analysis of the projects that go forward. On Sunday afternoon, watching football, I tried to do a little bit of independent analysis of the 5 projects that have gone through. The Sonoma Children's Hospital, the Valley of the Moon Hospital, in the county's submission to the LAO, they say it was a $92 million project that they delivered for, I think, 76, or 7, I think it was 76. But when you go to the webpage of the county, it was clear that this was a $72 million design build contract. That's what they awarded. It was, in fact, over budget. You look at the Solano County building. They say it was a $27 million project. Every news report I read in the local newspaper say it was a $38 million building. I don't know why. I'm sure there's some explanation, but I don't know why. It is also clear that we might do some additional education efforts for counties. I read Stanislaus, or I read the Solano County submission, and it is very clear the criteria they used did not comply with Public Contract Code 20133. The county did not consider cost at all. It was sort of an extraordinary discovery. The same is true of the Stanislaus swimming pool. They report to the LAO the 5 criteria that they used in awarding this contract. They did not consider cost at all. They did not consider life cycle costs. They did not consider the safety record of the contractor. They made up their own procedure and awarded the contract as they saw fit. That should be of some concern to this committee, and I will be happy to share those materials with you.
Mr. Toppin, you need to begin to wrap up, sir.
Okay. PEG will opposes the extension to other project areas and entities. In the last year, we've added design build authority for wastewater, correctional facilities, state buildings, local streets and roads, and state highways. We might figure out whether those things are working before expanding it. We're opposed to a one-size-fits-all approach and statute that would upset a delicate balance of agreements reached on the various subject areas and contracting authorities, including deals that were part of last February's budget deal. In closing, I will say I give proponents great credit for rebranding an old failed practice as something that is new and different and faster and better and cheaper. And in fact, it is none of those things, and it does not serve the public interest or taxpayers.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Topping. Any questions,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Topping? All right. Sure, Mr. Price.
Senator.
Do you find any redeeming social value in this approach? Are there any elements that are useful, can be helpful, might be adaptable?
I think it can be adaptable if we sort of adopt the approach that was used as it applies to state highways, and that legislation requires early involvement of the public agency in preliminary design and in awarding of the contract, and it also requires public inspection. I mean, if we are going to allow folks to proceed without bidding and without active involvement of a public agency, at a minimum, there should be strong oversight and public inspection of projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toppin. Next gentleman is Murtaza Baksamusa.
Yes. Senators, Murtaza Baksamusa, Center on Policy Initiatives. We staff a National Resource Center on Responsible Contracting. We're here to testify about the public interest components of design build. Particularly, the same process that makes the design build vehicle faster is also the one that removes the public agency from control of the project once a project is awarded. So there are 3 preconditions to design build I think you should pay attention to. Firstly, you should know exactly what you want. Bidders can and do submit bids that deviate from agency expectations. For example, if you want pipes to be underground or repair work should be blended into the architecture, you should have thought about it beforehand, which is why it does not make sense for maintenance projects where there's a high likelihood of change orders and the design component itself is pretty marginal. So that is one criteria. The second is in terms of costs. You get what you pay for. Public agencies need to anticipate and estimate the costs even before a design is there or the environmental impacts are known. So put in perspective, even though in the public works arena there is consistent underestimation, design build does not fare well in that regard either. Design build requires allocation of these resources of funding upfront, which is why it makes it critical to anticipate the funding earlier. The third is monitoring and compliance program setup. Especially inspection is inherently governmental. It should not be outsourced. Setting up a labor compliance program is expensive and it needs to be implemented. This is why we recommend a minimum $2.5 million threshold to keep that threshold. And finally, we want to recommend that you categorically exempt maintenance and operation of facilities from design build.
Thank you for your testimony. So any questions of the gentleman? Mr. Float, you're next, sir.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Willie Pelote, representing the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. I'm not going to be redundant. I've worked with both of the previous speakers, Mr. Murtaza and Mr. Tompkins. They've given you what we believe is the elements that needs to be given to the committee relative to the design bill use at the local level. But what we do want to do is point out for you the need to be very careful in how you move forward. We want a full protection for the work that is performed by public sector workers as public servants at the local level. We want to make sure that if this is the intent of the committee to move into this area, in addition to what have taken place in the state budget, which we did not agree with, we want to go on record because we think that was the wrong way and the inappropriate approach that was taken by the legislature to do what happened in the budget project when it came to the design build as well as the 3 Ps. We wish those things would have happened in an open forum. But if we're going to go into this direction, what we want to draw the committee's attention to is that there is a certain amount of work that has traditionally been performed by civil service workers at the local level who are taxpayers within the state of California that needs to be continued to work and protect their families. And we do not want to see the design bill come in that removes competitive bidding process and then replace those people's jobs with work that will be done by someone who will design it, build it, and inspect it, and think that we're going to get the cheapest, the best quality for the state of California and its different local entities in the state. So, but my colleagues who have laid out for you, I think, I watched it on television. I've seen both of their speeches today. We worked on it collectively together. And to keep from being redundant, we will submit a white paper to the committee laying out all of the different reasons that we think are important that the members of the committee should consider. It's the intent of the committee to move in a direction of the use of the design bill at the local level. We've been on the forefront of this for years, and we will continue to do so, but we have some real concerns with anything that will replace the work, and I will repeat this forever, of the workers that perform traditional public sector work at the local government level. And for that, Mr. Chairman, we look forward to working with you and in the future submit our document.
Thank you for being here. Any questions of the panelists? No. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your testimony. We have two that have indicated that would like to speak regarding today's hearing. First would be Richard Markison, who's with the Western Electric Contractors Association, and then Carlos Mejia, who is with ASME, Council 36. Both of you should come to the table at this time. All right, go ahead.
Good morning, Senators. Richard Markison, representing the Western Electrical Contractors Association. I find myself in the enviable position of being able to agree with both my colleagues, with the Associated Builders and Contractors, but also with Mr. Curtin and the Carpenters, in that some of the procedures that are included in the selection process, these were outlined by the legislative analyst, should appropriately be moved to the pre-selection criteria. The design-build method is an appropriate additional tool for public agencies to utilize when procuring public works. That makes a lot of sense. Moving skilled labor force, safety records, those provisions into the qualification process makes sense to us. Also, the standardized procedure, as it's been pointed out, that the existing statutes occur in many sections of both the Public Contracts Code, the Health and Safety Code, and other areas. Standardized statute would certainly seem to make sense for design builders in California. We appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts with you and wish you the best of luck as you deal with this issue this year.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, sir.
Honorable Chairman and Committee, it is an honor to speak in front of you today. Along with my colleagues, Dr. Mirza Baksamusa, as well as Willie Pelote, the one major concern that we have as representative of AFSCME Council 36, the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, is protecting those jobs that are traditionally held within our services, mostly maintenance. At times, the scope of design build is a lot larger than what we enter into. Specifically in San Diego, some of the jobs that are done, some of the bigger projects, design build does work well. But what we're looking at during this hard economic times is that governments need to become a little bit more ingenuitive and also learn to work with other labor projects. One thing that's been done now is that we've actually been able to go ahead and take in a lot of work that has been contracted out before in order to save money at the local government levels. This is something that if design build did not have a threshold of the 2.5 million mark, it probably would have not happened. The reason we feel that you should keep a 2.5 million threshold is to be able to allow governments to be able to go ahead and work these things out. It allows for better productivity and much ingenuity on both ends.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yes, Mr. Chair, other members of the committee, Mark Smith on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies of California and the Infrastructure Delivery Council, here in support of Design Build today. As you're aware, Mr. Chair, our organization is a frequent sponsor of Design Build legislation. In fact, it was our measure several years ago that expanded Design Build into the area of wastewater, other water facility projects. I'm not going to make the argument to you here today that Design Build is the tool for every project. It is not. But having it as part of the arsenal at the state and local level for infrastructure project delivery is critical. Those decisions are made on a project-by-project basis, and where appropriate, design, build, or other alternative project delivery methods can be valuable to save time and money and promote the investment in infrastructure that, as everyone here today knows, is not occurring as it should in the state of California. I think, the status quo is obviously not meeting our infrastructure delivery needs. So this is a reason to justify the use of design build where appropriate and as necessary. We look forward to working with you on this issue in the future and urge your continued support for these types of alternative project delivery methods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any question, Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Cruz?
Good morning, Chairman Cox, members. California's 10-year transportation needs are estimated to be at $125 billion. Unmet maintenance needs over $1 trillion. We all know there's no silver bullet that will solve California's infrastructure finance problems. However, new and innovative ways to finance, design, build, and operate and maintain transportation facilities must be part of the solution. We support design build as a delivery method to, one, create jobs that was indicated earlier by Mr. Curtin. My industry is hemorrhaging with 25 to 30% unemployment, and these will move projects off the planning table and into construction and expedite that construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Mr. Vu?
Good morning, Chairman Cox and members. Just very quickly, Thomas Vu with the California Chamber of Commerce. We are in strong support of design build, and we think design build and other alternative project delivery methods will put jobs on the ground faster and help stimulate the economy, as well as getting public infrastructure projects completed quickly. And I think that benefits everyone involved. Thank you.
All right. Any members of the committee wish to make any comments at this time? Ms. Keel?
Very informative, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I think that, there's a lot of good information here, and I very much appreciate you keeping things on time.
All right. Mr. Price?
Yeah, also just want to thank you for, it's been very informative. I think there's still some issues that have to be resolved, but I think it is certainly a tool that we should consider very seriously in our toolbox of economic recovery, and I support that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you both for attending. Let me just say to you that the process will be complete when Mr. Detweiler has finished his summary and delivered it to the committee members. And I would anticipate that's somewhere in the neighborhood of a 7 to 10 day turnaround?
Yes, sir.
7 to 10 day turnaround.
May I interrupt, sir?
Sure.
Just one comment I forgot to make. Mr. Cavagno from San Diego County sent a note up after he finished his testimony. There's potentially some other projects in my district, but also a crime lab is under consideration depending on funding, and they have several that are under the threshold, but they would be viable design-build projects. So I just want to add that to the record.
Very clever of him to add that in your district.
Fast on his feet, wouldn't you say?
Well, what we do know is that just a couple of years ago, the construction industry was the #1 industry in California. What has to occur, and we all need to work together to get there, we need to stabilize this economy, and we need to add jobs. It really is jobs, 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 and I know that's what the governor has said, but in the final analysis, we do in fact have to stabilize this economy, and we do in fact have to add jobs, and the construction industry is a very important part of that ingredient. So we thank you for being here today. Thank you for your testimony. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to either call me or call any member of the committee or call Mr. Detweiler. Thank you for your attendance.